I think that with the number of incidents in the USA between the police and citizens, there's just been a diminishing confidence that the institution is really serving the people. And I think after having a guilty verdict in something like this, where there was no legal way around it, no way, no lawyering, no amount of legal posturing that could get him to avoid this sentence. So I definitely think it gives us all a renewed hope that, there will be justice for all people.
That high school friend of the late George Floyd giving just a glimpse into the impact that the Chauvin murder conviction may have. It may not certainly fully restore faith in policing among communities of color, but it is restoring some faith. But part of that may also be because of just how rare it is to see a police officer prosecuted, and even rarer to see them convicted after a deadly incident. Now, according to a professor at Bowling Green, in the past 16 years, there have been approximately 14,000 deadly police shootings at the hands of the cops. Now, from those, fewer than 140 officers, that's less than 1%, were charged with murder or manslaughter. And of those 140 prosecutions, only 7 officers were convicted of murder, like Derek Chauvin was yesterday. And that's a recent trend. No officers were convicted between 2005 and 2015, which puts the odds of a police officer being convicted of murder at 1 in 2,000. So the question now is, will the Chauvin murder conviction change if or how often officers will face prosecution going forward in incidents similar to this? And what lessons from the Floyd Chauvin case could be applied to other cases where there are questions about deadly use of force by law enforcement? For that and much more, let's bring in Liz Crotty. Liz is a defense attorney, and she's also former deputy DA in Manhattan, now running to be the borough's next district attorney. Liz, thank you for a few minutes. And I know you believe that justice was served yesterday. I gave a snapshot of some numbers on a national scale nonetheless. Do you think it changes the dynamic, coupled with obviously the technology of body cams and how ubiquitous cell phones are, that there will be more accountability going forward for law enforcement if it merits it?
Yes, I think there's going to be more accountability for everyone. I think in the 21st century, evidence has changed. As you said, there's body cam, there's video, there's digital. There's so much more evidence available to us today that I think the accountability across the board is going to change, because we are all accountable. And the video on the George Floyd case was shot by a bystander. So I think that we're all going to be subject to more accountability by people who just see everyday events.
Liz, let's say you're DA and God forbid there's a police shooting and it's a questionable use of force, and it's a tougher call. This isn't something over 9.5 minutes, but it's one of those split-second decisions. You are, or would be, part of law enforcement working hand in hand with the police. Should your office be the ones to, go to prosecute the cops? Should it go to a special prosecutor? How should it work?
Well, right now, the way it currently works, if there has been a deadly shooting by a police officer and there's no weapon recovered on the scene, the Attorney General is the one who prosecutes that case. The district attorney's office does police shootings where there was a weapon recovered on the scene held by the defendant. So that's when the Manhattan DA gets involved in police shootings.
I talked about this in the previous segment. What was notable to me was you had the police chief, you had a long-standing officer from homicide. They all testified against the officer in question, clearly breaking that blue line. Do you think this is a one-off, or do you think that's one of the things that's going to come out of this going forward, where a bad cop, if you will, won't be protected because of the badge?
Well, I've actually represented police officers before who were charged with crimes on a state level. So I do think that there have been prior prosecutions of police officers. I don't think that they get a lot of press and notoriety, but there have been prior prosecutions. And I think, again, nobody is above the law. We are all subject to the same rules. And if somebody is breaking the law, no matter what their job is, we have to hold them accountable. That's what the district attorney's office does. And I think that's what the district attorney's office that I want to lead would do.
let me switch gears here for a second, Liz. As I mentioned before, you are a candidate to be the next DA of Manhattan. The current DA, Cy Vance, as most of my audience knows, is still doing a lot of the legwork on what may end up with the biggest case of his career, the tax fraud investigation into Donald Trump. Whether he lied about the value of his properties to get better deals on loans, to also reducing tax bills in the process. Now, former Trump lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen, he's met with Vance at least 8 times, if not more, and he said he thinks Vance close to bringing an indictment. By most accounts, there could be cooperation. You got CFO Alan Weisselberg and his family. Conceivably, some, if not more than, could turn on Trump. Weisselberg's been running finances for Trump since the days of Fred Trump. So I assume, tell me if I'm wrong, but the timetable would be more likely than not that the successor of Vance would at least be inheriting an ongoing case or being the one to take the, intelligence, if you will, or the evidence and bringing it forward. How complicated is that going to be to inherit, literally an international case?
Right. I was in that office from 2000, 2006, and I did complex white-collar cases. So I fundamentally understand in state grand juries, hearsay is not permissible. So you have to bring in all of the documents, all of the witnesses, and all of the different information in order for the grand jury to vote any indictment, to have reasonable cause to believe a crime has been committed. Whoever takes over the district attorney's office on January 1st, 2022, I hope it's me, will be inheriting thousands of indictments. And if a grand jury has already voted that there's reasonable cause to believe, and they've already done a grand jury presentation, there's no reason to believe that that indictment would be different than any other indictment that you would inherit on the first day of that job. And I think that the trial team is very well staffed, and I don't know why an investigation team would have to leave based on the change of guard. They still know the case best. They've indicted it, they've investigated it, and then they can try it.
Given the experiences you just outlined, and I'm not holding you to this, but what do you think the timeline will probably look like here? Will this have movement before Vance leaves office? Will there be a transition and say, okay, basically we got this thing teed up. It's now for my successor to take it forward? What are we looking like? Because we understand the Vance probe of the many probes going on nationally is the one that's most advanced.
Right. Well, I think, the grand jury proceedings are secret. They are subject to grand jury subpoenas, and the public at large does not know what the timeline is. I am a constituent right now who's running for the office, so I have no idea what the timeline is, where the investigation is. It sounds like from the press that there's exposure not only for the president, but for the entire Trump organization and how it operated here in Manhattan.
Liz Crotty, wish you the best of luck, and thank you for a few minutes.
Thanks so much. Nice to see you.
You too. Up next, we change gears. The QAnon conspiracy believers, they are the core of Donald Trump's base, but they've also done some real harm. And now foreign governments are using QAnon to attack the United States. We're going to be speaking with a key researcher from that new report. That's coming next.